crowds were like merging in on each other and literally throwing bottles and buckets, and it looked like a total mess here. That people, it was, and now, and I want to bring you back to these live pictures to show you. I told you earlier at the subway station there were people up on the roof. Police were able to clear that for a little while, but now they are going back up. Originally, they were using a ladder. Now they've got people up on the roof, and they're holding out hands for other people and just pulling them up onto the roof of the subway station at 14th and Union Square. So they did manage to get the ladder away from them, and presumably that ladder was there for the construction happening in this area. But the crowds are trying to get up on the roofs of this. They're trying to get up onto the statue over here. Now, a few minutes ago, we showed you the statue and the crowd was gathered around this. Now we've got some people up on the statue, but a lot of that crowd has dispersed. So it is moving around a bit, but it is also filling in, which is just a scary prospect here. Again, police aviation overhead trying to get a handle on this too, and trying to position police officers where they need them. But I keep being drawn back to this picture here where people were trying just to get through traffic, and now people climbing on top of their cars to the point where you almost can't see the vehicles.
Yes, Shannon, we are getting some information now that 6 trains are right now bypassing the 14th Street Union Square station in both directions, obviously in deference to what's going on there. And you mentioned that where we saw the people up on the roof there, that has been under construction. So that added danger of what has been a construction area for weeks now. That's that big entrance to the train station right there in Union Square Park. Probably why they were able to find a ladder around there. And I'm assuming the workers, once they started seeing the crowds and stuff, kind of dispersed themselves.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the case. And you're seeing right here an arrest being made by police officers. But look at the chairs that are strewn about. So chairs were being thrown. They're trying to put up barricades. But as people try to get through those barricades, police are now making arrests through this area. And we talked about that gazebo over the 14th Street station. You know, it's under construction. That's a fear in and of itself. But it's not intended to hold human body weight on top of it. That's not its purpose. So this is a whole nother problem that could evolve because of this completely chaotic crowd. I mean, that is literally the only way to describe a crowd like this. And they're all looking for something free. Who knows if they're going to get it at the end, and who knows what that is going to look like when this is all said and done.
Right. And Shannon, even though we had heard that Kai Cenat had been streaming live from down in that crowd, at this point, we don't even know if he's still down there, do we?
No, we don't. You know, I'm trying to look for that green shirt again, and the crowd is just so thick. It's hard to make it out. So we genuinely don't know. But how he would get out of this crowd at this point is a question as well. I can't even imagine how he would work his way out. I don't even think police officers would be able to get to him to help him out if that's what he needed at this point. It is just a mob scene down below.
Right, and it does not seem like he walked into that crowd with his own private security who could potentially help him navigate his way out of that situation. We are starting to hear that there have been some NYPD officers who have suffered some injuries. We have no idea at this point the extent of those injuries. I would imagine, considering the atmosphere down there, that we are going to start to hear about injuries. Police as well as those who are there in the crowd.
Oh, I would absolutely think so. But you can see things have certainly changed on the police front. You were looking down at 14th Street now, and you see the line of officers here where when we first arrived on the scene and officers were first arriving on the scene, what we saw was truly remarkable. You saw a group of officers, maybe 10 or 15, and they were actually holding plywood over their heads. And they actually took cover behind some of the cars that were stuck on 14th Street as the crowd approached them, throwing things at them. I mean, it was something I've not seen before. It's like they had absolutely no fear, and the police officers, really not prepared for it, were forced to retreat. But now it looks like they've got sort of a human barricade up along 14th Street on the south
to try
side
to get
of
some
Union
order.
Square. Yeah, they're trying to get some sort of order here, but there's significantly more police presence now, and it does look like they're starting to get a handle. I think they started to arrest people. Maybe that made a difference, but they're starting to get a handle. And again, they've got the advantage of police aviation overhead that can tell them where they need to be. But again, I keep being drawn back to these cars. The first few cars here have now virtually disappeared in this group of cameras. So clearly. Yeah,
and there are two rows of cars there, it appears, that now just have a mob of people sitting on top of them.
You know, Chief of
Department.
Department.
Show it to you with Street Spotter 7 here. We can actually like highlight it for you. That's a car there. It looks like it's just people, but there's actually a car under there.
Among those who have been on the scene for a while now is Chief of Department Jeffrey Madry. So you got to believe that reinforcements are pouring in there. We see that with the officers now lining 14th Street there. They're going to need a whole lot more officers if there are any hopes of trying to bring some order to this situation. Although people, it appears they've moved out of the park, that's
and
that really open space,
down
to the street.
Towards the street.
Yeah, they seem to be moving, but we've seen this happen a few times before since we've been over the scene. Again, we've been here for probably 45 minutes now, and for a while, it almost seems like a pack mentality where someone sees someone move and they run aggressively in a direction, and a whole group of them run with them. So it might not actually mean anything. We were watching some go from the south side of Central, or Union Square Park. I keep saying Central Park. From Union Square Park, and they were running towards the north, and then they would just sort of double back and head back into the fray. So I'm not sure if it's a mob mentality where you see people going and you think that you must be intended to go in that direction as well, but that's what we're seeing again going down Broadway here. They're literally just moving along, not quite sure what's on the other side of that. I'm actually going to see if Captain Randy can move a little bit to the right for me so that we can look down the street a little bit and see what's causing this.
We see them dispersing and moving.
Running down the street there.
I mean, I got to believe for a lot. Go ahead, Shannon.
Go ahead. Yeah, this is something we've been seeing where they'll run aggressively in a direction, and it just seems like some people see them running and they're like, well, we should do that too. And then they all just sort of come back. So we're not quite sure what is causing them to do that, but we've been seeing this in various different directions throughout this last 45 minutes or so.
Yeah, you got to believe for a lot of these people down here, a lot of them really young people, it's a happening. They've come perhaps to get some free stuff, but I think they're part of a happening now. Eyewitness News reporter Stefan Kim is standing by with more. Stefan, where are you right now?
Well, Sandra, as you can see, I am standing next to the Union Square subway station entrance where it looks like it was closed off because of construction. But look up on top of that. That's what's happening on top of the subway station entrance. There's, I can't even count, countless people up on top of there. They're climbing it right now, as you can see. In fact, if you can pan to your left, they're actually on top of the statue here at Union Square. I've actually got a couple of his followers here with me who can kind of explain to us what they were expecting, what happened. Young man, give me your name real quick and tell me why you came out here, what you expected to happen, what did happen.
All right, my name is Dilakwan Tavius. So basically, it's a Kai Cenat, Phantom, all of the AMP members, I don't know about all of them, but they pulled up, do a little meet and greet and a giveaway for the fans.
Giveaway of what was the understanding?
So, from my understanding, PS5s, video game accessories, PCs, but I don't think they will actually give away an actual PC because how is somebody going to carry that? So I'm pretty sure it's gift cards for them to then go and get the P5 themselves.
Safe to assume that you, along with your friends, came out here thinking that you would get some freebies, is that correct?
Not that we're thinking, but there's a chance to because, there's so many people and there's only so much you could give.
Has any of that happened? Is he here?
He's here right now, yeah, and they were giving out, but people are, people are being people. There's so many people here, people are pushing around, so you can't really get it organized.
Okay, and before we came on, you were telling me that, in your own words, that some people out here were bugging out. Explain to me what you saw, what you meant by that.
Bugging out, like you can see, there's no excuse, obviously, for what happened, but, stuff like that just happens all the time. People being reckless. It's New York City. Stuff like this happens every day. Well, I wouldn't say every day, but
what?
You know what I'm saying?
Well, thank you and be safe. As you can see, Sandra, we've also heard and seen incidents of construction equipment behind me. I'm going to show you one last live look again of what's happening here. Construction equipment being tossed around. We saw smoke. I'm not sure if that was a fire or some kind of smoke bomb. Again, this was all sparked by a Twitch streamer, a social media influencer. He has 20 million followers. He asked them all to come meet him here at Union Square for what was a PlayStation 5 giveaway at 4 o'clock. Apparently, we're also hearing that people showed up only to find out there were no freebies. And as you heard, he is here. At one moment, he was live streaming in a van nearby, but he did step out. As you heard, he's out here greeting his fans. We even observed Chief of Department Madry out here having objects thrown at him. Cops are obviously outnumbered out here. They're standing back for the most part. We're hearing that there are officers who have been injured, unclear at this hour, the extent and severity of the injuries. But, you know, we're also seeing paint left over from this construction project near this entrance that's been tossed around and vandalized. Some of the equipment at the entrance here. As we made our way towards this area, there are many, many streets around here closed. Police officers, we noticed, closed off traffic as high as 20th Street. Trains are skipping this subway station now, so police are asking everyone to avoid this area. But as you can see, there's a large crowd here. We're hearing estimates of thousands and thousands of people who showed up, and clearly NYPD is vastly outnumbered in the situation.
Stefan, I don't want to interrupt you for one quick second right now, because you're looking at live pictures of a car that was literally covered with people, and we do believe that that was the vehicle that had Kai Cenat in it, which you can see now looked as though could have been leaving the area. That is why you're seeing that crowd there chase after.
That's it.
That's the vehicle right there that they believe Kai Cenat is in right now. As Stefan was saying, he was there. He was in the crowd for a little bit of time, but clearly this was an out-of-control crowd, and no freebies given away, no giveaway whatsoever getting in the car. But clearly you're looking at a very dangerous situation with this car now driving pretty fast with those people clinging on to the side and top of it.
It's mind-boggling.
It's mind-boggling why they're not stopping to let these people off the car. And then someone fell off. Okay, joining us now is Bob Boyce, former NYPD, to talk more about this situation. Bob, can you hear us? It's Liz Cho and Sandra Bookman.
I can, Liz. I can hear you.
Okay, we know you're on the phone. I don't know if you have an opportunity to see what's going on in Union Square, but talk to us a little bit about police procedure. Obviously, this was a situation that police were not expecting. So how is it that they start getting the upper hand in crowd control here?
So they call the level 3 mobilization. That's citywide. So there's going to be cars from every precinct in the city coming there. They have to stage first, and they have to get together. Then they have to, at some point, go in and disperse the crowd. Now, someone should be on a bullhorn right now dispersing this crowd. I don't know if they're doing that yet, but that's usually what happens. Generally speaking, they'll bring in mounted to aid in that effect, and they'll start diffusing the crowd as best they can. It looks like you have an unruly mob right now, and they have to bring order to it. But citywide units are coming. In the meantime, they'll have to do with the best they can with what they have.
How much of a challenge is this for law enforcement? Look, we've seen similar things on the Jersey Shore. Somebody sends out an announcement on social media that there's going to be a party. The next thing you know, you've got 3,000 people on a beach at 11 o'clock at night. This seems like a similar thing. We're giving away freebies in Union Square at 4 o'clock, and the next thing you know, 5,000 to 6,000 people show up. They're not getting the freebies, so they start acting out. How difficult is it for the department to get a handle on this and keep it from turning into a kind of free-for-all?
We've lost Bob Boyce. He's on the phone. We're going to try to reestablish our connection with him, because obviously there are a lot of questions. Oh, Bob is back. Bob, can you hear us?
I can.
Did you get any of that question? You know, these calls going out on social media, obviously young people know it's out there. They got the message. They're showing up at 4 for something free. 5,000 other people show up. The police are sort of almost behind the 8 ball. How difficult is it for the department to keep track of these things and to try to bring some order to the situation and keep it from becoming a free-for-all like we've seen here in Union Square?
Intelligence.
All right.
Let us know when large gatherings are coming, and that's what's important to understand. You have to get out in front of this before it happens. Usually, there's sneaker giveaways, whatever the case may be. A new product coming out, generally speaking, we know what's going on within Manhattan South. This apparently was a little, they got past it, and so now they have to deal with it by bringing resources immediately.
Do you think Kai Cenat, considering his posting on social media and urging of this gathering here so large and not going what appears to be the proper channels, will he be facing charges?
I would doubt to be honest with you. He didn't really create this. It's his ability to bring people together, which is the issue. So it sounds like he's doing this in altruistic fashion, but I don't think there's criminal charges yet. We'll have to take a look further, but it doesn't appear that way to me now.
How has police strategy changed, I guess, in the last couple of years in terms of handling crowds like this? You know, when officers first get there and they come across what appears to be a very unwieldy crowd, what is their initial approach to try to calm things down?
Generally speaking, you immediately call for help, and you would call the borough command, who would bring resources in. We have task forces who are trained in crowd control. This is not something we don't have, but you have to get them to the scene, and that's the hard part. You want to disperse without any more violence or any more action, but it sounds from what I'm hearing that some police officers have already been injured. So this it looks like an escalation right now more than a diffusion.
Look, you've seen everything. You were with the department for decades. How surprised are you to see this pop up in the middle of a summer afternoon in Union Square Park, and honestly, police struggling to try to get a handle on it?
With the power of social media, it's not unusual, to be honest with you. You see it in other cities. We haven't had this in New York for the most part, flash mobs and that stuff. We're able to get out in front of this through intel assets to find out where this is going and go there first and kind of quell the situation and turn people away from that park, from that meeting area. That's the key here, is to get out in front of it initially. Apparently they didn't know about this influencer, and so this is what we have now. This will diffuse, but it'll take a couple hours to do so. Really? You think it's going to take that long? At least 2, because you have a lot of people there and they don't want to go home. And especially now that he's left. So there's a real danger here, because you have gang issues, you got alcohol issues in the park. There are park regulations that you can make arrests for this. They're not there yet. But now you need some police leadership on the bullhorn, moving people out of there as fast as you can. Yeah, we're looking at more live pictures right now from Newscopter 7. And Bob, like you said, we are now finally seeing a lot more police presence there. You can see them kind of lining the area almost shoulder to shoulder in certain parts. But this crowd, it keeps moving. Yeah. And you have these cars that are still stuck in the road with hundreds of people surrounding them. I would imagine it's got to be very scary for those people who are in those cars. Yeah, it is, because they can't control where they are, and it's tough to get out of there. You know, traffic in Manhattan, it doesn't move at all at this time of day. So this is a tough time. But what they're doing now, go shoulder to shoulder and go through the park and moving people out, hopefully into the subway system, but also ensuring the people in the subway, which is right there, make sure they're safe as well. Well, I think they've actually stopped subway traffic. The trains right now are bypassing 14th Street and Union Square because they don't want to get all those people into the mix there. The other side effect of this is we are going into the evening rush. So what's happening there is going to sort of have spider legs, and it's going to affect a large swath of downtown. It will, and unfortunately, it is Friday. You get less people. People like to take a long weekends. So Bob, hopefully that's part of the issue here. Bob, I'm going to interrupt you for one quick second. We do want to get to Josh Einiger, who is in the crowd right there, and check in with him. But please hang on the phone with us, Bob. Go ahead, Liz, Josh. Can you hear me? Yep, go ahead. All right, Liz, we're on 14th Street. That bus that's backing up from the crowd, we understand that this guy, this influencer, is on that bus, and the police are backing him out. That's what we're hearing from various people in the crowd. The crowd is following the bus. There's a huge complement of police in helmets and with batons out and with their pepper spray out, trying to keep people, including us, by the way, back from the bus. We're going to walk back here. Jared, let's go back in a second. And we're going to back up right now to 5th Avenue. This is 14th between Union Square and 5th Avenue. You can see a lot of people surrounding this bus right here. The police, I'm not sure how they got this guy on the bus, if that is in fact what happened.
I don't actually know what he looks like. There is someone in the bus. This police officer asking us to stay on one side of 14th Street because they're trying to figure out how to get this back. But you can see what's happening. It's a really out of control situation. A lot of police here at this point, but they obviously are not in control of this crowd. Now, I can tell you there are some reports. Police don't quite know what to make of it. The people I'm talking to, that there have been some number of cops who sustained some number of injuries. It's not clear how serious they were when they first arrived, and they are now at least trying to set up this perimeter around this city bus. Why don't we come out to Fifth Avenue, Jared? And we're just going to get kind of out back this way. But you can see these police officers here in the helmets. They're ready for anything. Now, I did talk to one member of the NYPD a little while ago who said they really, really don't want to arrest people. They really do not want to make this situation potentially worse. What they are hoping is that it dissipates, but of course that seems unlikely, and so they're here kind of ready if it does escalate, but you can see they're still not quite fully staffed up and fully under control here. They have called what they describe as a level 4 mobilization. That's the highest level of mobilization that the NYPD has. That means they have cops coming in here from all over the city, from every single precinct command in all 5 boroughs to try to help, and they are coming here and putting on these helmets. And we see people running here, so it's not really clear why these people are running. It's a pretty volatile situation, Liz and Sandra.
All right, Josh, we do want you and your crew, obviously, first and foremost, to be careful. We know it is a very fluid situation. We know that this crowd has been running in every different direction, so we do want you to be careful. I guess the question, is there hope, considering the police are trying to take this bit of a standoff approach, that the influencer who we believe is inside that bus, that they're going to allow him to complete this fan meet and greet?
Well, so I didn't quite understand the question. I didn't hear the question because it's pretty loud here. I'm sorry. And we have somebody who looks like he's being arrested right here.
So the influencer, is it
really unclear.
Is it your impression they're trying to get him out of that area, the influencer?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Yeah, 100%. So they managed to get him, if in fact that's what happened, and Jared is shooting this arrest happening right here. So, hey, Jared, come back over here. You see me? All right. Can you take a look at the front of this bus, see what we can see in the bus. There are people on the bus. It's unclear if they're arrested or not, or if they've just been put on this bus. And I don't know who. Yeah, sure. This gentleman at the front of the bus passed the bus driver, or somebody with chains. I mean, I don't know what this influencer looks like. I've personally never heard of him. I don't know if he's on this bus. That seems to be what people all around here think. They all have their phones. They're all taking pictures. And you can see a lot of police supervisors trying to control this. We're going to step out this way.
We understand if you need to.
Yeah, be careful, guys.
Continue to walk, but you can see now that some of the crowd on top of the bus that is also, I believe that is the same bus that was backing in or out of the area there. But you can see the crowd has now converged and surrounded that bus.
On the phone with us right now, John J. Professor Brian Higgins. Professor, well, we see you, so we're hoping you can see us. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. What do you make of all of this? We heard the chief mention earlier that social media has really changed things.
It has. It's brought this crowd to this location right now.
What do you think police strategy is and should be right now to try to disperse this crowd in the most peaceful way?
That is exactly what they're going to try to do. What we don't want to see, and what the NYPD is very good at, is instigating the crowd more. So their presence right now and their direction to their officers will be to try to disperse this crowd in as peaceful a manner as possible. And you can see, even though they're calling in officers from all over the boroughs, and it may even come to the point where they call in off duty, there still right now appears to be overwhelmed. So if they were to use force and this crowd became even more violent, the NYPD would be in a very tough situation.
Yeah, and I think the chief mentioned, and Josh said as well, that's really not what they want to do. They don't want to get into a real fight, so to speak, with the folks that are out there. They really just want to get them to go home. I think we're all shocked by how quickly this crowd merged onto Union Square and how quickly it got out of control because of a simple social media post about free items, and how somehow the police missed that and were not able to get ahead of it.
Well, I think everybody missed it. I don't think anybody saw this coming. And I think we're all surprised, just as you said, how quickly this occurred. So I think there are probably people within this crowd who are just using this as an opportunity to do things that they shouldn't be doing. So, you know, the blame shouldn't be on this influencer or the police, but we have a large, probably a significant part of this crowd are people who are just using this as an opportunity.
You don't think there should be any blame put on the influencer who prompted this massive come meet and greet without going through the proper channels of letting the police know? And I don't know, do you have to get permitted for something like this?
This should be permitted. I'm sure there will be an investigation to follow to see what this individual intended. Did he know it was going to be this big? But yeah, there is some responsibility here on whoever's involved. Remember, we call them influencers. We see a lot of stories of people on social media who are just individuals who become famous. But then there are a lot of people who have that title of influencers who have organizations, corporations, media folks behind them who should know better. And that's why we have permitting, so that there can be a plan.
All right, we're going to ask you to hang on for one quick second. We do want to go check back in with Josh Einiger, who's on the ground in the middle of that crowd. Josh.
Okay, so Liz, I have a little bit more information from a high-ranking police source. That bus there that we've been watching, the influencer who's at the center of all this is not on that bus. He left, we are told. He is no longer here. They got him out of here. The people on that bus are all under arrest. I don't know how many. We had shots earlier of, I don't know, quite a few. How many? Maybe a dozen, maybe more people, and a lot of cops who are with them. They have them on that bus, and they are backing that bus out of here because they are under arrest. The YouTuber, the Twitch star who started all of this is, I am told, no longer even in this vicinity. But this is how these things happen. They happen on social media. They happen kind of, rumors spread among this crowd. The crowd thinks that he's on the bus. And so as a result, they're not leaving the bus. And so now the police are trying to get it out of here. And you can see now cops who have batons out. Jared, look to the right. See the cops all lined up here? They're trying to form a wall to protect the bus so that they could back this bus out of here. This is 14th and 5th. This is an articulated bus. It takes a lot of skill, I imagine, for a bus driver to back one of these things up under the best of circumstances. Now you've got police trying to make sure it doesn't hit anyone, it doesn't somehow get mobbed by this mob who, according to the police, are incorrect that the guy they're looking for isn't even on the bus. So it's sort of a fog of war here among the police. You know, it does appear, at least at this intersection here, they've marshaled a fair number of resources. They keep kind of growing. But if we look in the bus, actually, you can see inside, people are sitting as if they are handcuffed.
All right, Josh.
And there are quite a few people
We're going to
seated in this bus.
interrupt you
Go ahead,
for
Liz.
one quick second because we do want to check in with Safan Kim, who is also there in a different area. Safan, go ahead.
Liz, so police just broke the barricade. They bum rushed the crowd, this entire crowd down Broadway. Hundreds of people went sprinting down Broadway. Heck, if you move to your right, this is the speaker system now that the NYPD is playing. They're letting people know, to your right, Hector, that if they do not disperse, they'll be arrested. This was the barricade here. This was the blue line. And as you can see, if we pan back to our left, they have moved the line of police officers from behind that barricade, came came out, spilled out onto Broadway and 14th Street, and now they're pushing left. Now they're pushing forward. They're pushing the crowd. We're moving with them. We're going to stay with the police officers. That's probably the safest place that we can be right now. There are objects flying around. They're moving the barricades. You've got bottles being thrown around. They're all on top of buses. There's a bottle. Watch out. We've got stuff being sprayed here. Hector, let's move over here. They're on top of the car, but let's follow behind.
We just lost Safan's signal, but he is watching.
They're pushing him north.
Oh, you can hear him now. Okay, and you're looking at aerial views from Newscopter 7, and Safan is down there right now in that crowd as police move in and start to push the crowd and manipulate this crowd to kind of disperse them.
And exactly what Chief Boyce said just a few moments ago, that he was surprised that he didn't hear the, what do you mean, the loudspeakers, the blowhorn.
Yeah, and Bob is still with us. Bob, like you said, they were coming in, they were going to start with the blowhorn, and then they were going to start dispersing that crowd, just like you said.
Yeah, you're going to have to give direction with the bullhorn and piece off the crowd, piece by piece, different areas, and push them out of the area. You know, the batons will as a pushing device more than anything else, and the helmets will be on the police officers. So this is a process that's going to go on for a little while. You'll hear the bullhorn giving clear verbal commands. If you don't do that, you could be arrested. And so a lot of times they'll take over buses and use them as arrest vehicles. City buses, whatever they can get their hands on, put them on the bus and get them out of there. So I'm not surprised by with their tactics right now.
Yeah, and you can see now as we look down from Newscopter 7, this crowd now is being sectioned off. Whereas one big massive crowd in the center of Union Park Square, it is now being sectioned off and dispersed slowly, but it has been a very difficult and touchy situation as we hear that police are now armed with pepper spray and batons. They have their helmets and gear on, whereas initially we saw officers who were not prepared to help get rid of this crowd in a fashion because it was just so large and overwhelming.
And the objective really is not to have that confrontation.
Right.
It's to get them to disperse as safely and peacefully as possible.
Yeah, can we go back to Safan, Kim? Have we reestablished our signal with him? Because he was walking with police. We have not. How about Josh Einiger? Okay. So obviously, because it's a very fluid situation down there, and our live capability as our crews walk with these crowds sometimes goes in and out. We did just reestablish with Safan. Let's go ahead and check in with him. Safan.
Okay, so there's the first observation, several arrests happening right now. We saw 2 individuals handcuffed. They're being loaded onto this MTA bus. When you last saw us, we were extracted from there by police officers because you can tell it was getting pretty chaotic. There were bottles being thrown around everywhere. So what the officers have done is they've moved the media now. This is 14th Street. Hector, if you can pan over to Union Square, we're on the south side of 14th Street. In fact, they've asked us to give some space and distance behind this line because they may need to bring the barricades back out, they said, and who knows if this line gets pushed back, right? So they're keeping us this distance back. This is south of 14th. You're seeing the mess and the chaos now in Union Square. If I'm going to have Hector sort of pan along 14th Street, you can see this is a standstill. You've got some of these are police vehicles, but at least on Broadway there were, civilian vehicles just being climbed on top of, broken into. But this crowd is dispersing now. Still a lot of people here, but they're not in the street at this point. So at least at this stage, it looks like police officers got them off the street and have contained them into Union Square. There's probably a second move at some point they're going to make, but I guess they're going to let this thing hopefully fizzle out on its own so it's a little more controllable. Chief Manager, as I mentioned, on the corner of Broadway, if you can get a shot of that, as I mentioned, he got struck with some kind of object. I can imagine probably a water bottle or something because a ton of that was flying around. But that bus that was out there on 14th moments ago with everyone on top, that's been cleared. All those people that were climbing on top of street poles and light poles, they're now taken off of that. They've been cleared. Several arrests made. And as I mentioned, they're no longer in the street on 14th and Broadway. This is all being controlled by police officers and they're being contained in Union Square itself. But there's still a lot of people here, as I mentioned, so who knows how this thing ends at this point.
Stefan, I will say, this is like the first time that we're seeing those shots where it looks like police outnumber the other people, the fans who have shown up there, which is a significant difference that we saw about an hour ago.
Yeah. So we're going to switch from you, Stefan, to Josh, who is in another area of Union Square Park there. Josh?
Yeah, we're here. We're now 14th and University, guys, and I want to show you. So this area, I think we're kind of on the other side of where Stefan is, and so police have clearly created this as a zone, sort of a protected zone. It's the beginning of their ability to sort of take charge of this situation. In fact, I see a gentleman under arrest over there to the right of that bus, Jared. Do you see him? He's not wearing a shirt. Do you see him? So these buses, and I think that was Bob Boyce I heard earlier, these buses are clearly being used as prisoner transport vehicles to get people out of here. Now, I spoke to a police source a little while ago. The last thing they wanted to do was arrest people because that just inflames the situation. The last thing they would want to do is add to the chaos, but they had to take some control here, and it was almost inevitable at this point that they were going to end up making arrests. We have, we saw a bus full of prisoners that backed out of here a little while ago, and it looks like they're now adding to that bus here. Jared, if you want to pan a little bit to the left, the long line of cops blocking that bus. So they've clearly created this sort of perimeter around this area where they're trying to run their policing operations here. They have a drone in the air just over this scene, Jared, coming down right over the bus. They've been flying that drone, which obviously gives them kind of a close-in look at the crowd. They obviously also have their aviation units, helicopters up overhead. But if you see to the left into Union Square, it's a little bit hard from this vantage point, but we see people standing up on planters, and really, the crowd has not really dissipated within Union Square. A lot of people did kind of back out of here with that first bus. They had a huge contingent of NYPD with helmets and riot gear protecting that bus full of prisoners as it backed out. But obviously, hard to do there. They're still clearly outnumbered by this sudden, flash mob that popped up kind of out of the clear blue sky as far as they're concerned, something that ginned up here by an influencer you may never get heard of. We're going to back out. We'll go back to you.
All right, Josh, thank you very much.
Well, look, Josh can't see our vantage point, right, but it does appear there are fewer people concentrated in Union Square and in that area than what we saw, say, 45 minutes ago.
Yeah.
And so they've had some success.
Right. And we are seeing for the first time, like you and I have said, a complete flip-flop of police now overwhelming the situation and getting control of the crowd, helping to disperse or arrest them. But the feeling of the rowdiness, the out-of-controlness, appears to have calmed down significantly in that area. But as you can see, much of that area with traffic still very much at a standstill. And as far as we understand, the subway is still completely bypassing several lines, the 4, 5, 6, several other lines now still bypassing Union Square
14th Street.
And 14th Street as well. But you can see a lot of people walking around, traffic slowly getting by through those crowds. But police now
seem to have a handle on the situation. Sal LaFury, security expert, standing by. Hi, Sal. How you doing?
Hey, guys. How we doing?
You've watched this unfold. Just your thoughts. This wasn't really even a flash mob. It was a gang of folks apparently brought to Union Square by a social media post and the promise of free things.
Yeah, it's all the makeup of everything that can go bad quickly. We've seen this before with celebrities going out and texting, saying that they were going to be at a location, and all of a sudden the followers or the fans show up. When you add the compound that we're going to give away something for free, it really becomes a problem, and you can see the amount of people that it can generate in a location quickly. I think the key thing here is that fortunately the NYPD has sufficient enough force that you can come in and take control of it quickly without turning it into a riot. And I think the show of force was appropriate in this instance and kept it from turning into a bad situation.
The show of force seemed truly necessary about an hour ago. Sal, I do just want to let people know that we understand that subway service has resumed in this area that we have talked about. The trains had been bypassing it at the height of that flash mob, but we understand now that subway service has resumed. Sal, I want to get back to police approach now as they have kind of gained the upper hand in this situation. What will their approach be moving forward?
Well, I think, one of the big problems, and I'm not sure if any arrests were actually affected, but one of the big problems is, and I think someone had mentioned it earlier, that you have these, you have groups that show up just to instigate and just to carry on. And I think that they appear to be weeded out of the crowd and moved on. So I think what you'll have is you'll still maintain a force on the scene. There'll be enough for crowd control, and as time moves on, people will slowly start to disperse. And I think that's going to be probably the game plan going forward for this evening.
But beyond this evening, how do you get a handle on it? We heard Chief Boyce say earlier you got to get out in front of it. How do you do that?
The timing on this is what's really problematic. When you have someone who's talking to, up to tens of thousands, 20,000 people at a time, it's difficult because the time frame doesn't allow you the time to react. The intelligence division is monitoring social media. They'll look at things like that may come up. But something, it's one thing when you have an organized protest. Something like this is a lot more difficult to pick out. Of all the social media posts, this is a little bit difficult to pick up. And then you have it just happening so quickly. I think what should have happened here is the organizers of this and the people with PlayStation or the folks controlling the social media component needed to get on the phone, talk to the department, and let them know what may have occurred. And then you can get in front of it and you can plan it. But when you do something which in essence becomes a surprise attack, it's very difficult for the officers to respond to that, for the department to respond to that.
Which also might be part of the allure for why they want to do this in the first place. Sal, just stick with us for 1 second. We do want to check in with our crews who are on the ground down in Union Square. Josh Einiger has been there. And Josh, how are things looking there now?
Well, so the last time you came to me, we kind of stepped out just away from the barricades, and you saw we got mobbed ourselves. We're now in a safer spot behind some of the cops here on 14th. In this area, they've frozen. There's a bus here where they're putting prisoners, and you can see some of them, police officers, going through the process of processing, and not clear how many people have been taken into custody right here. People up there on the top of the Union Square subway, that gazebo over the subway station that has been under construction. And people broke into the construction safes, the construction equipment that the workers had left behind. And police believe they are armed with saws, they're armed with paint, they're armed with various construction tools, fire extinguishers. I just saw a cop walk by with paint all over his arm. This was really hand-to-hand combat with a lot of these kids. And by the way, some of them are young kids, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, who are in all of this crowd, which is really hard to imagine. Also, Jared, show the ground here. Look at all this trash. So this is an example of what was being hurled basically at police at the early moments when they first, hey, check out the curb over there in that lane. People were throwing cups, bottles, mostly plastic bottles. I see some glass bottles that were clearly hurled. I see a big rock. So this was a very, very dangerous situation here. Look at this rock. This thing came from within Union Square. This could really hurt somebody. And somebody just knocked over a barricade there that cops had put up. So it's still a pretty volatile situation. It is, as you say, more under control than it was. There are fewer people in the square. But there come more cops with helmets and with batons and with zip ties ready to place more people under arrest if need be. This is a level 4 mobilization in the NYPD lingo. That means every available police officer in every command in all 5 boroughs is right now rushing back here to Union Square to help in the fight. So we're going to keep working on this from here. That's what it looks like on Union Square. At least we're in a safe spot, and we'll keep you posted, Liz.
All right, Josh, and you were showing us a lot of the garbage, a lot of the mess that has been left behind by all this massive crowd. You know, when you're looking from Newscopter 7, and we were talking about the construction that was there, and Shannon, you can see like the big splatters and areas of paint that were now dumped in Union Square Park there, and just the massive mess that has been left behind and all that construction that has been damaged.
Yeah, that is absolutely what you are seeing that is being left behind here. So once they get control of this crowd, which they are clearly starting to get the upper hand of the situation here, they still have to deal with a massive cleanup effort because this paint was being thrown at people and what you would like to think is garbage down below, and some of it is, but a lot of it is actually paint as well. And it amazes me that even as the crowd thins out, there are still people sitting on the top of that roof there and inside that broken into construction site. But as our crews on the ground have been showing us, we really want to show you from a bird's eye view because it really does tell a story here. You can almost see the police strategy unfolding here. We're going to bring up Street Spotter 7 for you. Obviously, the crowd has dispersed significantly. Are we out of the woods yet? No, there are still a lot of people here. But what we want to do is show you, it seems like police started, once they started to get the upper hands on the numbers, they started to cordon off. So they forced people down Broadway. We saw people running. They were actually being chased by officers who have now set up their perimeter right here at 14th Street, or rather 13th Street and Broadway. Now they did the same thing as you come north along Union Square. What they've done is set up right around here so that you can't get past them once you've moved out. And even though the crowds have dispersed, the police are staying in those lines, trying to keep people that have moved out of Union Square Park to stay out of Union Square Park. So it seems like Union Square Park itself, the crowd has thinned significantly. Here at 4th and 14th, this is where the biggest crowd is. But again, you see police here making sure that they don't come back towards Union Square Park. And we do want to show you this as well, because this is something we were showing you all along. Right around here is where all of those cars were stuck with people standing on them. Those have now been cleared out. So significantly less people here. And again, those police officers I talked about, there is a line there, and they are saying, you are absolutely not coming back into Union Square Park. And then a little bit further north up by 15th Street, you're going to see more police doing the same thing. So they're making sure that people don't come back once they exit out. But they still have a significant crowd here. Nowhere near the thousands that we saw before, but still a significant crowd. And as you mentioned, the cleanup after this is going to be immense with all of this paint that is now splattered along the south side of Union Square Park.
Yeah, and also just a huge relief to see those streets and those cars, those vehicles no longer covered with people. All right, Shannon, thank you very much. Our live coverage continues right now with Sade Badaranwa and Sandra Bookman with Eyewitness News at 5 o'clock.
And again, we are following breaking news in Manhattan. The NYPD responding to a massive, out-of-control crowd gathering right now in Union Square Park, where a social media influencer, Kai Sanat, told his followers he's giving away PlayStations. Newscopter 7 and Shannon Sohn is live over the scene with the breaking details, but we do have reporters on the ground. We're going to turn to Stefan Kim, who is in the midst of this for quite some time now. Stefan describes what the situation is where you are, right?
Yeah, so Sandra, about 15 minutes ago, this space that I'm standing in right now, this was 14th Street between Broadway and University. This was barricaded off by NYPD, and it was filled with only NYPD officers in riot gear. Now, we keep talking about the moment that police officers gained the upper hand. I can tell you how they gained that upper hand. We can break that down because we were in the crowd as that actually unfolded. So we were standing on Broadway at that intersection for our own safety along the barricade next to the line of police officers, and we noticed a flood of officers in riot gear show up. That's when, oh, here we go, something's going on. They're now moving them out of Union Square, looks like. you're looking north, and you see more officers arriving, heading westbound. They're moving the crowd, so you can see them on top of the structure, the subway station entrance there still, and it looks like they're attempting to move them perhaps eastward out of the park. But as I was saying earlier, a number of officers in riot gear just showed up, and it's almost as if they knew not to announce themselves or give anyone any kind of a heads up that it was happening. And as soon as they showed up, they broke right through that barricade, obviously practiced this more than a few times, and then just rushed southward down Broadway, east across 14th, and north up Broadway, and they dispersed this intersection here. If you look at it, Hector, again one more time, that's why this is now empty and occupied only by police officers. That perimeter has been moved, shifted as far east as maybe 2 blocks eastward and another avenue westward. So they're continuing to push this perimeter outwards, trying to gain the advantage, I suppose. We can only assume that inside of Union Square, here they go, they're breaking down barriers now, and now they're making a move. So I think they gave them about 20 minutes to maybe let them diffuse themselves, let them disperse, and now they're making a secondary move. Looks like they're moving the barricades inward more, and they're going to gain ground, right? So they're going to give an inch, take a foot. This is going to keep happening until, and there they go, and there's a crowd now moving eastward. Looks like there go cops now on the left of your screen. Their line is moving forward, and they're now moving them out east, and everyone now has now gotten off that subway station entrance that they were all on top of using ropes and ladders. Looks like they're coming down, they're making arrests over there. There's 2 individuals on top, and as Josh mentioned, some of these individuals are very young. I mean, middle school kids, very dangerous, right? They're climbing on top of these structures, they're being shoved and pushed around. A lot of them tell us that they weren't afraid for their safety, but they don't know what they don't know, right? This can turn sideways very quickly, and we are grateful, in fact, because when we were following them behind the perimeter, there was a point where things got dicey, and an officer pulled us back, extracted us. That was definitely for the better, but things are calmer, but as you can see, unresolved. So we'll keep an eye on things and be back to you.
All right. Okay, Stefan, thank you. Well, Stefan, we are now learning that actually investigators do know where that influencer is at this point. They are now going to interview him and try to get to the bottom of what has now sparked this mayhem. We now want to throw it over to Josh Einiger. And Josh, you were talking earlier about that Mobile 4 mobilization by police, which we are now seeing happening now. Cops were called in from all areas of the city to try to get a hold on this situation. What are you seeing now from the ground? Josh, are you there?
Oh, Sade, yes, I am here. I'm sorry, Sade, I didn't hear that you were coming to me. Let me just tell Jared that we're up right now. So I'm talking to Sade, and you can see this line of cops who are right now moving their way up into the square. Clearly they were, and they're moving the barricades right here. So they're basically expanding this perimeter into the square. This is a technique that we've actually seen them use. They're really well trained in doing this with the protests back in the spring of 2020 and beyond. Clearly they were waiting for large numbers of police to be able to be here so that they would have a critical mass of officers who could go in there, because they were outnumbered so obviously before this happened. But now, you know, the order was given and they're going in there and taking Union Square Park back foot by foot. And you could see the trash that's left behind, the paint that's left behind. We'll walk over toward the train station here, the Union Square station, where people have been jumping up and down on top of, you know, the station kind of gazebo here over the station stairs. This whole thing was a construction site, and it's now just an absolute mess. There were tool kits that the construction workers had left behind, dumpsters. Actually, check that out to the left there. Dumpsters that have been basically tossed over, that call ahead, that porta potty. People just laid waste to this area, grabbed whatever they could find. There's wood here with nails sticking out of it. They were grabbing this stuff and throwing it at each other and then at the cops when they tried to take Union Square back. And now, as we look back sort of toward the north, toward the statue in the center of the square, they are. And there was just some sort of explosion in the crowd up there. I don't know if you heard that. And I see people running on the other side of these cops. I don't know what that was, if that was some sort of controlled ordinance that the police set off. or perhaps something else. The cops don't look terribly concerned about it, so I'm not going to be that concerned about it, but it did set some of those, the kids here in the park running out toward the north. So they're sort of dissipating in that direction. Where they go from here, if this is really the beginning of the end of this crisis, I guess remains to be seen, Sade.
All right. Many people hoping it is the beginning of the end. Josh, thank you very much. Stand by there because, of course, we will be talking with you again. Right now, we want to toss it up to Shannon Sohn. She's been high above this chaos in Union Square really since about 4 o'clock. Night and day compared to what we saw when you first got up there. Shannon, just describe what you're seeing now. Josh just described police getting those people out of Union Square Park. They have had quite a bit of success.
They certainly have at this point. You can almost feel them breathing a sigh of relief at this point. We're going to bring up Street Spotter 7 so you can follow along with us and kind of give you the rundown of what's happening here. But you were looking down right here at Union Square West and 14th Street, and that is where Josh is, and he's been talking about the police forming a line there. And you can actually see the line of police officers, and what they're basically doing is as they push people out, they're forming a barricade and saying absolutely no one else is getting back in. In the last few minutes, we saw them decide to take those barricades a little bit further north off of 14th Street, as we've been saying, from the ground, and they brought those barricades into the park itself, and you can see them now set up here. And as the police came forward, the crowds literally ran to the north, and that is what we've been seeing them do. But what they've been doing is trying that strategy from several different directions. You can obviously see that the roof now of the subway station is completely clear, and as you've mentioned, the subway service is now reopened. So a night and day situation where there were thousands of people, maybe now hundreds, and they're staggered throughout Union Square West. Some of them went down Broadway as well as 4th Avenue, but even 4th Avenue, this was the intersection just about 10 minutes ago that was completely packed with people still. That has cleared out significantly as well. So the police, the strategy they seem to be using right now is to pick a crowd of people and force them in one direction or another. What we've been seeing is them taking people down Broadway and then setting up at 13th Street, making sure they don't go back. We just watched them do it at 14th and 4th, and we're watching them do it right here at Union Square and 14th Street. The last move that they just made was to come into Union Square, and they forced the people to go north, what was left of the people. So significantly smaller crowds that they were trying to corral and push away and then set up a barrier to make sure that no one got back. And that is the point that we are at now. You see these barricades of police officers all over the place. They are now significantly outnumbering the crowds, and here you see them moving these barricades again. So they're going to strategic points where they feel that they need to be and making sure people don't go back in. So the beginning of the end of this ordeal, it might be exactly what you are looking at now, but police certainly looking like they have the upper hand on this crowd control situation. And we've been talking about Kai Cenat himself. We watched him go away in a car early on in this. I mean, he was only here for maybe 15 or 20 minutes, and look at all the chaos that ensued. But again, it appears at least that police are getting the upper hand, reporting it live over Union Square.
Incredible just to look at the scene right now, Shannon. And right now we're trying to effort some of that video of when this first was sparked by Kai Cenat. We're going to try to bring that to you, but this is a far different scene. There were thousands of people there in Union Square. And at one point, you could see, here we're looking at it right now, you could see the crowd actually rush cops. Cops retreated at some point, and then they tried to get an upper hand. Kai Cenat was in the middle of all of this pandemonium that you see here on the right side of your screen. We're kind of giving you highlights now of what happened in this past hour. But Sandra, it's incredible. You were here.
Yeah, it was absolute chaos. Police that arrived on the scene, a fairly small contingent compared to the crowd of folks that had showed up to get whatever free giveaway they thought they were going to get. They were throwing bottles, in some cases, pieces of construction equipment. Shannon, you saw folks up on that roof. When you look at it, it's been an hour ago, absolute chaos, and now Union Square, if you're just joining our coverage, you might be wondering, well, what all the fuss is about, because Union Square looks a little bit like itself, right?
Yeah, it really does, except for the fact that it is sort of a mess. I mean, you can see the mess that people left behind. And unfortunately, and this is the part that's really disturbing, is yes, you see the things that people were throwing around. I don't know if you can see it. Construction cones were being thrown. There were buckets that are used, for cleaning supplies, but there were buckets of paint as well. And that's what you're seeing down here. You see this blue paint off of the gazebo covering the train station there, and you can see white paint all over the place. So people were throwing whatever they could get their hands on. And we described it really as a mob scene. And part of the problem there was it was such a mob scene. When things were being thrown, you didn't even see them coming at you. People were getting hit in the back of the head. And then they started turning some of that stuff on to the police officers, who at one point, and I think you showed pictures of this, were using just a plank of wood to cover themselves and then hiding behind the cars that were stuck in this mayhem. And I think the worst picture of it all was right in this area here, which is now quiet and now has a police barricade up. You saw the cars that were stuck there 6 deep that literally were teeming with people climbing on top of those cars. And now it almost looks like any other day with a little bit more of a police presence and a small-ish crowd compared to what we had seen before.
And a lot of trash. Shannon, thank you very much.
Trash.
Great job giving us a bird's eye view of exactly what was going on and all the issues that ensued because of this gathering in Union Square Park.
And joining us now on the phone, we have Robert Boyce, who's the former NYPD Chief of Detectives. And Bob, thank you so much for joining us again. You have been with us as we've been following this breaking news for more than an hour now. And I know during the last segment, you talked about that this is probably something that's going to take a few hours to get under control. So I guess you really have to say to cops, job well done so far in trying to get order back to this pandemonium that has existed for more than an hour now.
Sade, it's a strong point here to understand that these streams of kids that are running away from here, people running away, they could create mayhem somewhere else. So they have to be followed. Aviation has to be on top of that and see where these crowds go, because they could do some massive looting as well as they're leaving the area. So not only do you have to take back the park and clear it out, but you have to ensure you don't see other crowds break off and create other mayhem somewhere else in the city, head to Midtown or something of that. So this isn't over by a long shot. There's a lot of work ahead.
And can you talk about some of the tactics that have been used to try to get this crowd under control? We saw the officers begin to encircle the crowd. I know this is a tactic called envelopment. Can you talk more about that?
Sure. So if you got to clear an area out immediately, you have to go over on a bullhorn, tell them if you don't leave immediately, you will be arrested. Those who don't leave will be arrested. Will be charged anywhere from misconduct, from any kind of misconduct up to riot. So this is important to do. You really have to take a very strong profile here and move these people out of the way.
Now, at this point, I think what we're seeing right now on screen is a car that we believe that social influencer, Kai Cenat, is in. He was leaving the scene earlier, probably about 30 minutes ago or so. What we understand, Chief Boyce, is that detectives know where he is, and they are looking to question him about this. We've also been told that there is at least one, probably more, detectives that do monitor social media, but really no one expected this crowd to get so big. Are you still there, Chief Boyce?
I'm still here. I'm still here.
It's still here. So there are folks at the NYPD monitoring social media that keep an eye out for things like this, correct?
Yeah. So here's the issue with that. Generally speaking, when we have a new product coming out or a giveaway, it's done by corporate America, and they are in touch with the NYPD, and it's all set up, and there's significant resources there to quell it. This is something different. This is a social influencer. That's something different that they don't have a grip on. This should have been picked up. I don't know if it wasn't, but this is something that turned into that social media has to be monitored. It generally is by the Intel division. I don't know if this is the case here.
Can I ask you, do you expect that the social media influencer might face some charges? I got to believe that what you want is for a lot of people to show up. You don't necessarily think it's going to turn into mayhem, but you want as many people as possible.
You do. When you create a stir, you really don't know your reach. who's going to be around this day. So that'll be determined at a later date. There will be a critique done of this incident, and that part of that is to go to the DA, Manhattan DA, and ask them to present your evidence to see if there was a possible charge against this influencer.
And Chief, can you talk briefly about this influencer? As we mentioned, that he is now being questioned at this time by investigators. Can you talk to us about what level of questioning that is actually happening with this influencer?
Well, you want to see if it's not a hoax at this point, that he actually did have these objects to give away, and why was he doing it, and who was behind him, and what corporate entity is behind this event? Is it part of the product they're giving away? Those type of questions you'd be asking him. Exactly how often and how long have you put this out? This is going to happen. Is this something immediate that happened just today? Go down here and give him this free stuff, or has it happened in the past? In the past week, today's Friday, did it start on Monday? Those type of things, timelines have to be developed to see if there's a criminal case.
And so if he did not have any giveaways, then he could face potential real charges here.
You know, the police officer.
I think so. I think so.
Okay. Police officers went in, obviously, with a soft touch. The hope here is that you can get folks to disperse, not have to arrest anyone. They did end up having to arrest folks. My assumption is, one, what are we likely looking at in terms of charges for those who were taken into police custody? I think most of them were loaded onto that MTA bus. Disorderly conduct, that kind of thing?
Sure. So it can range anywhere from disorderly conduct, criminal mischief, up at the felony riot, which you need 4 operatives for that in the penal law, which they have. They have plenty. So that will be determined at a different time. Looks like they broke in and took control of certain construction sites, used that equipment, and it sounds like they had paint balloons as well.
And if they are minors? Because a lot of these kids look very young, you know, and if they're minors, what does that mean, Chief?
Well, the minors will go to family court. We'll have to see from there.
Okay. Okay. Well, Chief, you can stay along with us. We're going to now go to Josh Einiger, who is live there on the scene. And Josh, we can see things are getting a little bit more buttoned up. What can you tell us from where you are now?
Yeah, things are, well, you can see a shot of some trash here in the street and a guy sitting on the, looking kind of shell-shocked, just a random civilian who's here. This is a huge police scene. If you look to the left a little bit, some top police brass who are here just sort of figuring out where we stand. Let's look to the left a little bit and pan around. Look at all the trash in the middle of Union Square. Union Square has been cleared of people aside from people who are supposed to be here at this point. That is NYPD, which put out basically what they refer to as a level 4 mobilization. Every available cop brought here from every command in every corner of the city to try to restore order, which just immediately spiraled out of control here, seemingly out of the clear blue sky. Top commanders, there was a video that we had earlier. I'm sure we've seen it on a loop of top commanders, including Chief of Department Jeff Madry, who's right there in the middle of that scrum right there, getting actually themselves having things thrown at them. Big construction site in the middle of Union Square, right by the train station, and so people were grabbing construction implements and just hurling them at each other, at police who were here. And we see police walking around with, like, if they have white shirts on, they've got paint all over their shirts. They were really in it with a lot of these people who got incredibly out of control in almost no time at all. The police completely caught off guard. Hey, look, Jared, look at this. These chairs basically flattened, ripped into pieces that presumably were used as projectiles toward the cops who were here trying to restore order. This was a really hairy situation, and now it's a huge mess. Lots of people under arrest in buses that have been pulled out of here, and we're waiting for a briefing from police to see kind of where things stand right now. We've heard that police officers were hurt, don't know the extent of those injuries or how many. We've heard that civilians were hurt, again, don't know quite how bad, and we do know that quite a number of people were placed under arrest. Obviously, the influencer at the center of all this is going to have some questions to answer from the NYPD as well in terms of how this all started and why it got so wildly out of control. Sandra, Sade?
Josh, quick question for you. Chief Boyce mentioned that even though you have managed to disperse most of that crowd from Union Square, he said that when you deal with a situation like this, sometimes you have to follow that group of young people, especially, to make sure that they don't cause trouble somewhere else. Any evidence of that?
Well, yeah, so look, I'll tell you this, Sandra, there are a lot of cops here. It's nowhere near the number of cops who have been brought to the scene in general. Look down at that corner, that side of this frozen zone, lots of cops. But we watched police, if you look north, basically pushing the crowd north through the square. And presumably they have done just that. They're pushing them further uptown. You'd have to actually ask Shannon what she sees uptown about where they've all gone. I know early on, cops were hoping this would just sort of end and people would disperse without further incident. Clearly that did not happen, but the question is now, I mean, do they continue to, move through the city in out of control groups? Hard to tell. The object of their attention has left the scene, and by now everyone's aware of that, including the people who came here to see him. So, I guess we'll have to wait and find out from the police executives who are right now preparing to talk to us and give us an update on where things stand from here.
All right. And Josh, I know that you mentioned that some of those that were arrested were on a bus, and then you said that there were a couple of buses. I know you don't know an exact count, but any idea how many buses full of these potential people who were arrested?
Okay, so here's one bus right here. It's still sitting here. They have some people under arrest up there. I see, I don't know, it's going to be a really long throw, but there's the yellow back of another bus down about a block and a half down. That would be what, 5th Avenue? And there's at least another bus that we saw being backed out of here before that in a pretty dramatic scene, surrounded by cops with batons and brandishing pepper spray, as people at that moment thought that Sai Sanat was on that bus, and he wasn't. But that's what the crowd thought. And so they were trying to get at that bus, and it was about as tense as I've seen things here, because police were vigorously trying to protect that bus, which was actually in fact full of prisoners and cops who were processing the prisoners as it was backing down the block. And these are articulated buses. They're not easy, I would imagine, for a bus driver to back up in the best of circumstances, and under this situation it was a pretty complicated scene, to be sure.
Harrowing.
Yeah. Well, Josh, we're also hearing that they are going to have a press conference at 5:30 at 14th and Broadway, so I'm sure you're going to be standing by there to check that out. But Josh, let me ask you this. I know that there are a lot of businesses in that area. Have you had an opportunity to speak with any of them? What was it like for them? And I'm sure it was a pretty scary scene.
Well, so, I think people kind of took cover. We haven't seen where we are now. It's been cleared of civilians. The Whole Foods is right here. And for a while there, police executives ran into the Whole Foods to try to kind of step away from the crowd. If we look kind of down Broadway here, you see some civilians. There's actually, I see a woman with a baby sitting in that bank, right there in the bank, right? So I don't really know what her story is, but, presumably, yeah, there were people here who were not a part of this, and they had to figure out where to go and how to get out of it. That presumably is one of them. We haven't had a chance to talk to anybody, though. It's been, obviously, as you know, pretty hectic, but I'm sure we'll get there.
All right, Josh Einiger, thank you very much. We are going to turn this over to Stefan Kim, who is also in the midst of that chaos in Union Square. Stefan?
Well, Sandra, a couple of notable observations in the past 10 or 15 minutes since we last spoke. About 10 minutes ago, on the spot that I'm standing right now, you heard both Josh and I mention how many of these people in the crowd were very, very young, maybe middle schoolers. There was maybe an 8-year-old girl standing here in the street, clearly distraught, separated from whomever she was here with, her guardian, her parents, and there were 2 officers consoling her, trying to figure out who she belongs to. So it gives you a sense of how young some of the individuals were in this crowd, how dangerous it could have been. I heard you talk about the perimeter we have now. If you can see Hector come this way, there are police officers on horseback now. That is along Union Square West and 14th Street. That is now the westernmost perimeter that NYPD has created. Obviously, if you look a little closer here, you mentioned the press briefing. They're setting up the podium as we speak. And I also heard you and Josh speaking about nearby businesses. If Hector can get a shot here, this is the Whole Foods on 14th Street. And if you can see, there's a security guard standing at the door. For the past hour and a half, that door has been shut, and there have been several security guards standing there. In fact, some police officers guarding it, making sure that nobody who's not an employee comes in or out. But actually, if you can come back this way to give you a sense of what this looks like, we have a woman here on a motorized wheelchair just passing through 14th Street. So I don't know if you call that a good thing. Obviously, this means that the crowd has dispersed, but is that normal? Probably not. If you look up there, where minutes ago, that subway station entrance, you can see the rope, the red rope that they used to climb up there, that had several people on top of it. That has not been cleared. You are still seeing, however, little by little, arrests still being made. Even seconds ago, they brought somebody out in handcuffs from all different directions, so they're still making arrests. And as we mentioned, they're on that MTA bus right here on 14th Street, and it looks like the NYPD at any moment now is about to give us a briefing. So as soon as we hear those comments, we'll bring that to you live. Back to you guys.
Certainly, worlds of difference between where you're standing now and 45, 50 minutes ago. Once police moved in, they managed to do what the NYPD does well. They managed to disperse that crowd fairly quickly, considering what we saw at the height of the chaos.
Yeah, I mean, right, so if you remember when we were in the thick of it, right when they broke through, when the police broke through the barricades and in riot gear rushed down Broadway south, east across 14th, up North Broadway and dispersed that crowd, you heard me then saying that they essentially established now this space, this perimeter. All of 14th Street was cleared, and they had them sort of contained in Union Square, and we've seen this before, right? We've seen this through all the protests several years ago, the strategy, the tactics, they're very well versed at this. And we can kind of predict what would happen. We knew that they would allow some of that crowd contained in the park, in Union Square Park, to just diffuse itself, anyone who wants to disperse, and then they made their move, minutes later. So we'll keep an eye on things, and as soon as police give us an update, we'll bring that to you guys.
And Stefan, I just want to ask you before you go away, you were talking about some of the young people who were in the crowd. We're going to get to Josh Einiger in 1 second, but I want to talk about those middle schoolers you were talking about, saying how distraught they were and how they were separated from some of their friends or maybe their family. Can you talk a little bit more about that and what officers were able to witness and how they tried to diffuse that situation?
Yeah, right. So to be clear, middle schoolers, they're sort of older and younger end, right? You've seen some middle schoolers that seem to be maybe 8th grade. They seemed perfectly fine, but as I mentioned before on the air, they don't know what they don't know, right? They talked about being trampled, pushed around, things being tossed, but they thought it was kind of fun because that's what kids think. And then you have the younger side of that, what looked like maybe a 6, 7, 8-year-old, and when you're separated from your guardian or your parent, whoever you're here with, and in the middle of all of this, you can tell visibly she was very distraught. Police officers couldn't do a whole lot in the beginning of this, right? If you remember an hour ago, they weren't even in Union Square. Union Square was, in fact, all of this, 14th Street, Broadway was a complete free-for-all. So they couldn't even begin to assist minors like that, separated from their guardians, until they had cleared this space out. So who knows for how long they were in the crowd, in the mix, lost.
Yeah, okay. Stefan, Kim, thank you so much. We now want to go back to Josh Einiger. And Josh, you were talking about that woman who was holding a baby inside of the bank, and now you are talking with that woman now?
Yeah, we're in the bank with her, Sade. This is Jaylene, and this is 1-year-old Ava. And this was kind of a scary afternoon for you guys.
Yes, it was. Just trying to get my daughter through the crowd just to even go run some errands. It was really crazy. It was really hectic.
You were saying you're from Queens. You were trying to go to Burlington Coat Factory, and you come out of the subway. What did you see? I
come outside, and the park is just literally filled with people, like crawling with people. And next thing I know, there's a whole bunch of cops that come by, and they got riot shields, and they're tear gassing people, shooting people with BB guns, and people are just jumping all over the place, running back and forth. It was hectic.
And what did you think? You're here with your baby. What did you think about this?
My first thing was just trying to make sure she's safe. I'm just trying to get somewhere where I can just keep her safe, keep her out of the crowd, keep her away from the tear gas and all the noise and people trampling over each other, and I just wanted to keep her safe.
Now, as this was going on, first of all, we were talking about businesses before. You made it to Burlington, and you said it was closed. They closed the gates?
Yes, they closed the gates because of just the entire crowd that was just standing. They covered the whole sidewalks, the park, the streets. Everything was just closed. Everything was just bombarded with people.
So as this was happening, did you know what was happening, what this was all about? Or
I knew that there was supposed to be a giveaway going on. That's why everybody came. There was supposed to be a giveaway. But when I got here and seeing the amount of people that was here, it was ridiculous, the amount of people that covered the entire park, And
you know, you were saying you've heard of Kai Cenat,
yes,
his influencer. What do you know about him? Do you follow him? Are you like are you a fan? Were you before today, I guess, a fan?
I've watched like a few of his videos, and I've seen like some of the things that he does online, and he does make good videos. He does make funny videos, but today was just a different kind of day. Like, this was just completely hectic, and it's like I do put a little bit of blame on him as far as like, you know, New York City is a crowded place. There's a lot of people. You never know what could happen, and today it just got completely out of control.
What do you make of what the police were up against when they got here? They clearly had no idea this was about to happen.
Yeah.
And they, you know, the first cops here were dramatically overwhelmed, overrun.
When I got here, there was actually a cop not too far from the park that was right here, and he ended up getting beaten and jumped by, I want to say, over like 10 people. I don't know what started it, but all I know is that I hear people saying they're jumping the cop, he's getting beat up, and then more cops come and they start, you know, retaliating and rioting against the people, and it was just hectic. And the only thing I could think about was trying to keep my daughter safe and keep her out of the crowd and keep her away from here.
That's wild. What did you see that officer after? Did they take him to the hospital, or was he hurt?
I didn't see the officer, but there were a couple of people that I saw that got up that had like lumps on their head. There were a couple of people saying, oh, they're shooting tear gas over there, and some people were also saying, oh, they're shooting BBs, they're shooting people with BBs, and you can hear it, like you can hear the popping noise from when they start throwing the tear gas. So you can kind of smell it too. It's like a little bit of a peppery smell. It's just crazy.
What do you make of this?
I think that this was just completely blown up out of proportion by all of the people here that came to contribute. I understand you're a fan of Kai Cenat, but it's one thing to just come and try and support him, but to come and make a mess of not just the city, but of just other pedestrians like me that are just trying to get by and go throughout their day. It's just, there's no consideration, and it's ridiculous, honestly.
All right, so what's your plan now? It's over at this location. You're still like taking cover in this ATM lobby. What's your plan?
Well, I'm actually here because there was a police officer that told me to come in here for safety, just to kind of keep my daughter out of the crowd so we don't get like trampled or arrested or pepper sprayed. So I'm just here just kind of waiting for all of this to be over, so I know, okay, it's safe for me to go out there and go home without having to worry about anything.
By the way, speaking of kids, I mean, did you notice how many kids were in this crowd?
Yes, a lot of the people that were in the crowd were like under the age of 18. I saw a lot of 10-year-olds, 9-year-olds, 8-year-olds. Some people even came with like their brothers and sisters and parents, and it was ridiculous. I feel like in a crowd like that, especially with what was going on and all the police out there, it's no place to have your kid at all.
Tell me your name one more time.
Jaylene.
Jaylene. I'm so glad you're okay.
Yes.
And Ava's okay. Yes. And I think it's probably safe for you to step outside now. This area is completely it's locked down right now by the cops. So I'm sure you can get it wherever you need to go. And I'm glad you're okay. And thanks for talking to us. So that's the situation. Should we step outside a second and just sort of see what it looks like out here right now? This is there are some kind of civilians who are here who are trying to make their way out of the neighborhood at this point, and cops trying to kind of guide them in the right direction. These are people who are not Kai Cenat fans, who I guess have come up from the subway or are trying to get out of this neighborhood so that they could get out of this mess. And what a mess it is. If you just take a look, if we just pan across Union Square right now, this is what became of this neighborhood in just a matter of a few minutes. It went from nothing to just pandemonium, and things under control now, and we'll hear shortly from law enforcement about their response and all the numbers about arrests and who got hurt. That woman said she saw a cop jumped and beaten by the crowd. What a mess here in Union Square.
An
Sade,
absolute
Sandra.
mess. A mess is probably the best way to describe it. Thank you, Josh. We'll talk with you in a few minutes. As Josh pointed out, the police are going to be talking about what has transpired there in Union Square in just a few minutes.
Looks like we've got that news conference about to get underway.
It looks like, I think maybe they're testing the mic and everything. So in this few minutes, you tell us upstairs, do we have time to pull in Jeff Smith for a look at the all-important AccuWeather forecast? Jeff, I think we have different kinds of storms moving in this way.
Yeah, you know, the good news is the thunderstorms that have been moving into parts of our area about an hour and a half ago have shown a lot of signs of weakening. So that is good news. I don't think we're going to get a whole lot in terms of severe weather near New York City into the evening. 76 degrees out there right now. Part of the reason that we don't have a lot of instability in the atmosphere, we had a lot of cloud cover, kind of not allowing those temperatures to get warm enough to support a big thunderstorm outbreak. Average high is 85. We only got up to 75 during the day today. But any thunderstorm that does occur into the early part of the evening, not everyone's going to get one, but if you do, there can be some heavier downpours in there, and it could lead to ponding on streets and highways, particularly north and west of New York City. That's your best chance of some damaging wind gusts and some hail out there. In the city itself, it's more like mid to late evening. That's our best shot at maybe getting a quick downpour moving on through. The good news is we clear things out, and it's going to be a fantastic summer weekend out there. Lowering humidity, a lot of sunshine returning, temperatures getting back up into the 80s. Right now, 76 degrees. Again, that's the warmest we've been all day. We had some big storms a little bit earlier in parts of Sullivan County. There was even a severe thunderstorm warning in that area around Liberty, and reports of damage as well. Jeffersonville, wires down there, even a tree fell on a car. Unknown if that car was occupied, but those storms were rumbling through there a little bit earlier, but they have since weakened. We're watching some more activity off to the north and west of our viewing area, but that shows signs of not really making it quite down to the I-95 corridor as we head throughout the evening hours, or weakening before it does so. We still do have a severe thunderstorm watch, mid-Hudson Valley, northwest hills in New Jersey, and the Catskills and Poconos right through 8 p.m. So any storm still does have that potential to produce some strong gusty winds, maybe some hail, and certainly some heavy downpours again, but mainly north and west of New York City. We may get by scot-free without much of anything in the I-95 corridor and all the way down to the coast, and the weekend is looking fantastic. We got numbers into the 80s again for tomorrow, and if you like tomorrow, you'll love Sunday as well. Pretty low, comfortable levels of humidity out there. Temperatures getting back up into the 80s again. By Monday, very energetic system coming on through the Great Lakes by that point. You can see the swirl here on the radar satellite, predicted radar satellite on our Futurecast, and that could cause some strong to severe storms in here by later on Monday afternoon into Monday night. That one looks a little bit more impressive than the one we're dealing with right now. Air quality going to be moderate for tomorrow. UV index is an 8, which is very high, and we're talking about pollen being on the moderate side. It's grasses, chenopod's, and nettle being the main culprits. So it's a heavy thunderstorm in parts of the area this evening. A lot of places will actually stay dry and get off scot-free. We're down to 68 for a low. We start clearing things out after midnight. Sunshine and some clouds, lowering humidity. You'll feel that tomorrow. That high getting up to about 84 degrees. A fantastic summer day out there. Clear to partly cloudy for tomorrow night. 69 in Midtown, well down into the lower and middle 60s in the suburbs, and even 50s in the coolest outlying areas. Here you go. Here's your AccuWeather 7-day forecast. Still comfy on Sunday, about 85, 80 on Monday. Watch for those mainly afternoon storms. Those could be on the strong side, maybe a lingering shower storm on Tuesday. Wednesday, partly sunny, so we have a break in there before maybe some more storms return into Thursday and Friday. So we kind of get back into that dog days of summer pattern where we have the humidity returning and also those afternoon thunderstorm chances returning as well as we head into next week. We'll send it back over to you.
Okay, Jeff, thank you so much. And again, we are awaiting this press conference that is supposed to be happening any minute now. It's happening at 14th and Broadway. What we can say as we're waiting for this presser, that detectives are currently questioning Kai Cenat, who actually sparked this mayhem, but no determination has been made onto whether charges will be filed at this point. And Sandra, we're now looking at this mess here in Union Square, but it has now been cleared. And we do have Shannon Sohn live at Newscopter 7 with more. And Shannon, we heard from Boyce earlier talking about how while this area may be cleared, they're worried that maybe pockets could happen somewhere else. Can you see from your vantage point, are police now in another area besides Union Square?
Well, I'll tell you what, we are just arriving back on scene after getting fuel. That's how long we were over this. This was about a 2-hour ordeal, but we want to bring the shot back for you so that you can get an idea what generally happens in things like this. And it truly is amazing because there were thousands of people there. And we're actually going to bring up Street Spotter 7 for you here so that you can see it. You're looking up Broadway, north of Union Square, as well as Park Avenue off to the right side of your screen there. And you can see this crowd that was dispersed by police has literally vanished into thin air. There's really nobody left. You see some people running here. You're going to see that on Park Avenue. So there are still pockets of people, but look at the difference in just an hour. This is maybe 20, 30 people in the intersection, and they're going all over Park Avenue, but it's not a huge group of people, so it's less concerning for the police officers. You can see them going up towards 23rd Street. This is the biggest crowd that we have seen so far. We had looked over on the other side on Broadway and didn't see any people. What you'll also notice is that police are here in the intersection here at Gramercy Park, so you can see that they are making sure that people continue northbound. And it seems that if they're pushing them north or pushing them south, everywhere the police set up, the crowd seems to thin out a little bit more. So that seems to be the strategy that they are employing at this point, is to push the crowd a little bit further north. They run. As they run, they start to disperse. So that is what we are seeing. In fact, we'll bring you a little bit south to see what it looks like on the south side of things as well, because we saw police pushing people down Broadway, and you're going to see here at 12th Street again, police are there setting up a line. But if you look beyond the line that they set up, and again, we'll bring up the Street Spotter for you so that you can take a look at it with me. You've got police aviation still overhead, but all the way down the street, you're seeing a couple of people straggling in the street, but not huge numbers anymore. And I think at this point, that should satisfy the police. You've got small groups of people, but way more police officers at this point than there are people. And we really want to point out what a difference an hour makes. Look at what it looks like in Union Square Park versus what it looked like an hour ago. It is virtually a ghost town here, nothing but police officers, and obviously the leftover debris. You see the paint, you see a wrecked construction site, and you can even see some of the barricades around that construction site have been pushed over, but you can see some of the things that people were throwing. We had cones in the ground, papers, there were numerous water bottles that were going around. And we do want to point out, because we were looking at this from the beginning, what you were looking at inside Union Square Park is what the crowd was throwing at each other. At some point, the police started to barricade, and this is before they got the upper hand and before they had a lot of officers there, and it was a small number of police. The debris you see in the street here where the press is now standing is where the crowd started to have altercations with police, where police were putting plywood over their heads and trying to get behind vehicles to get away from the crowds that were throwing things at the officers. And we mentioned there was some construction debris being thrown about as well. But you can see a total change in the atmosphere here. We're just going to bring you a little bit further over. You can see the biggest crowd that had been left over was here at 4th Avenue and 14th Street. That has completely cleared up. You still see that 14th Street is going to be completely shut down as police continue the investigation here and the cleanup and make sure that no one else is coming back. But what a difference. 20 million followers from Kai Cenat. He put out word on Twitch that he was going to do a giveaway here. That giveaway, I don't think ever happened, but so many of the fans came and it just got completely out of control, assuming there are instigators in that crowd, and it really did get out of hand. But at least it appears that most of the crowd is dissipated, both to the north and the south, and the stragglers that are still running around the streets are just that at this point, stragglers, and the police are still keeping their perimeter either in the park or far away from the park to make sure that those crowds don't grow to big proportions again. Reporting live over Union Square, Shannon Sohn, Channel 7, Eyewitness News.
It has certainly been an afternoon, Shannon, and the success they had in clearing that crowd away, a testament to the NYPD and the nearly 1,000 officers that they ended up throwing at this situation in an effort to get the upper hand here. And as you said, the stragglers, we heard from Chief Boyce, in a situation like this, not surprising. That's what they expect. They follow them until they finally, I guess, tire them out or make it clear that they're not going to be allowed to congregate anymore. Stephon Kim, He's still at Union Square, been following this all afternoon for us. The calm after the storm, I think that's a fair characterization, Stefan.
Yeah, that's fair to say. So the last time you saw me, we were talking about the perimeter that the NYPD began to expand out at Union Square West. So if you take a look down westbound, you're not going to really see it from here, it's too far away, but the mounted unit, those NYPD officers on horseback, what we're seeing from here is that they've now expanded that perimeter one more block, or half a block west. So they've taken all those horses and created a perimeter along 14th Street, moved that even further west. If we spin the other way, Hector, eastbound, what you're seeing on that side is a complete gridlock traffic jam. That pink piece of cake moving vehicle, truck, van, has been stuck there for the past 30 minutes or so. It's only now moving. And as we sit here and wait for this police report, I'm going to get out of the way because the MTA bus, which is now transporting the number, we've lost count actually, of arrested individuals from this incident that are on this bus. They're now moving this bus out of here eastbound on 14th as we await this press briefing. But a couple of sort of observations in this, what I guess you would call this after action review. I guess only a New York moment. When we walked up to this scene, we came down the west side of Union Square West, and if anyone familiar with Union Square, you know that there's a farmer's market that occurs along the west side of the park. And what was just unique, and only in New York, the farmer's market maybe 20 feet away from all of this mayhem and chaos, from all of these kids on top of the subway station entrance, throwing things, bottles, paint, you name it. And the farmer's market is just going on without skipping a beat. So only in New York can you kind of walk through this complete chaos and mayhem and riot, and people have to still get their produce, I guess, right? And so that went off without a hitch. They're now out of here because that all ended. And as you can see, one last look at this park as we await this press conference. This is what's left, this complete mess. The park is empty, except for all of this debris, rocks, shoes. I mean, this is some of the stuff that was thrown around at us. You got rocks over here. You know, full bottles of water and juice were tossed in our direction. But yeah, as you said, the calm after the storm, certainly calmer now. And even after they made that initial move where they pushed them into the park, I mentioned then that, hey, it's calmer, but there's still a lot of people here. That's, as I've been saying over and over, that's not the case anymore. So we'll keep an eye on things, and as soon as they give us an update, we will bring those updates to you.
You know, Stefan, you've been giving us an account from some of the people who were actually there, and it was a scary situation, not only for some of those who were in the crowd who were underage, but also for the cops. You talked about how they were holding up that plywood to block all of the debris being thrown at them. What was it like for you being in the center of all of this?
Well, unfortunately, we've all had experience and practice at this too, right? The past couple of years has given not only police officers, but members of the media and press a lot of practice in this exercise. So, you know, our first thing was, as I told my crew, let's get next to the blue line, right? You really can't predict what's going to happen, but you can at least kind of close off your blind spots, your rears, right? So we covered our 6 by staying up against that barricade where that line of police officers in riot gear were all lined up. We figured at least if anything happened, we'd be right there for them to intervene. What we probably did not anticipate is that mere minutes from when we established our position, that they would break through that barricade. And again, as I mentioned earlier, it seemed that that was something that they had planned, but didn't give any indication to anyone that that was going to happen for obvious reasons. So it caught us off guard, and they just kind of burst through that barricade, and it was like a bum rush. I mean, you can imagine like a NFL linebackers, you know, just a whole defensive line just rushing through with their helmets and Kevlar and shields and just forcing through the crowd. But because a lot of these individuals were so young, and we have to keep sort of emphasizing that, they were terrified, you know, not only of, again, a lot of them weren't afraid of what was going on here because they didn't know any better, but when you see that many heavily armed officers making a rush at you, which is what you wanted, right? They dispersed quickly and they sprinted in every direction. So that's where we sort of got caught off, because we were sort of stuck in the middle of that and the crowd dispersing. And as I mentioned earlier, there was, fortunately for us, an officer who saw us get tangled up in it, bottles being thrown around. And as I was pulling my crew to cover their heads, protect their heads from flying objects, an officer extracted us, pulled us down to 14th Street, behind the line, and we are definitely fortunate and thankful for that, because that went sideways very quickly.
You are a pro, experienced, and you know what to look out for and what to get out of the way of. Thank you very much, Stefan. We're going to turn now to Josh Einiger, who is also down there in Union Square. Josh, we're waiting for that news conference to come up. As you pointed out earlier, a lot of unanswered questions here. We can talk about the chaos, but we still want to know who was hurt, who was arrested, how did this happen, where's the guy that kind of triggered all this, right?
Yeah, I have so many questions, Sandra. That's just some of them. Before I show you anything, I just want to tell you, I just ran into the guy in charge of what's called the Strategic Response Group, which is the bureau within the NYPD that handles disorder, and he just looked at me like, he was just sort of stunned. They're all stunned that this happened. It all just came out of the clear blue sky. We're used to protesters or people who might have an agenda. There was no agenda here. This was just a flash mob, and they were just making mayhem because other people were too. Look at this. This is just a pile of Union Square chairs, and this one they've been like just folded up. This one is demolished. It's losing the actual seat part. And they were throwing these things around. The cops, I guess, piled them up here so that they'd be out of the way. Police right here have obviously, as Stefan has been talking about, maintained order here, which is good, but all the trash right here on the street. The questions you ask, Sandra, are questions that no doubt will come up and need to come up in the next few minutes when we hear from the Chief of Department, Jeff Madry, but also in the next few days and weeks. There's clearly going to be an investigation into this. Is this a criminal matter? This influencer who brought I don't know how many thousands of people in one of the most congested cities on the planet with no warning, with no permit, to Union Square and caused all of this? Is that something you would imagine will be investigated? But we'll see. What about the police officers who were hurt? We heard a woman who took cover inside that Capital One bank right there for probably 2 hours just waiting for someone to tell her it was safe to come out. She was there with her 1-year-old baby. She was out here when a group of these kids jumped a cop and started beating him. How's that, officer? And did any of them get arrested? And what is their status? There are truly so many questions. And I'll point out one thing Stefan was talking about the unpredictability of this crowd. We're used to covering civil disorder, especially over the last couple of years with all the protests that we saw in the spring of 2020 and beyond. This wasn't that. I keep thinking protesters because that's where my brain goes. These were not protesters. These were kids, some of them as young as 10 years old. And at one point we were on the air, and Jared Barnett, who's been shooting all of this heroically throughout all of this, took a step away from me and walked just away from a barricade. And I think you saw on the air how he was suddenly mobbed by a group of kids because they just wanted to get on TV. And it became a really kind of volatile situation because now suddenly there we were in this crowd. Fortunately, we were by the barricades in a similar situation to what Stefan was talking about. A cop saw me and pulled me into the sort of frozen zone where we all are now. And now we'll just show you right here. We're waiting for a briefing right now. That's the press setup, and we have a camera in there. And as soon as the Chief of Department gets out and starts walking this way, we'll of course bring that to you so we can hear really first of all, the hits, runs, and errors of what happened here today, because I still don't understand what happened here today. I don't know about you. But second of all, there's just a lot of questions, as you point out. How did this start? Could this have been prevented in some some way or detected in some way on social media? And you know, how did it end? And where do we go from here? So a lot of questions, and we are waiting. I have an eye on the SUV where the top leadership of the NYPD is right now, and as soon as they come around the corner and address the press, we'll bring it to you. Sandra,
Josh, you're not the only one. A lot of people don't know how this all started. I mean, it's been such a crazy scene there. You talked about Kai Cenat, and we have learned from the NYPD that they have recovered evidence from social media that Kai Cenat was out of his vehicle and interacting with the crowd before he left Union Square. So there are a lot of unanswered questions. What kind of charges will he actually face? Did he give any giveaways at this point? So Josh, stand by. Again, you're keeping an eye out on that presser with the Chief of Department, Jeffrey Madry. Now we want to send it up to Shannon Sohn with the latest. And Shannon, what are you seeing from there now?
You know, we're just trying to get a grasp on whether or not people are still around. And really, as we've been doing a once-over in the area with Captain Randy Empey here, what we're seeing is that a lot of the crowd has certainly dispersed. So we're just going to bring you through, in case you happen to be traveling through this area, you haven't heard about this yet and decided to give it a go. Broadway is shut down here at East 18th Street. You see the police closing off the street there, and that closure takes you all the way down through Union Square. Now, if you go over to Park Avenue, that they don't have closed until you get to East 16th Street, and this is a soft closure because you can see that we've got police here sort of just standing, and that is what's blocking your street. So they're being forced off onto East 16th Street as police continue to try to monitor the situation and keep control of it. Although there's not a lot of people here anymore, you have to understand what they just went through and keep that in mind. So we'll take you down to University Place, which hugs the west side of Union Square Park as you come south off of it. You can see at East 13th Street, you still have a line of police officers there. So that is essentially where they have shut that down to traffic. And we're seeing the same thing as you go just across to Broadway. We've got another line of police officers there. In fact, some of that has dispersed a little bit. Oh, there they are. They're one block further up. So the officers are still maintaining a perimeter. Here it is at East 12th Street. So that is what you are seeing in and around the area of Union Square Park. But as we bring you back to the park itself, it is still absolutely amazing some of the things that we are seeing left behind. We've been talking to our reporters on the ground who've been doing a great job explaining what the chaos was like when they were really in the thick of it. But one of the things we're seeing here, you know, we were just talking to Josh and Stefan, and you can see that pile of chairs here on the south side of the park. There's another pile on the other side of 14th Street here against this construction shed. But in the middle of 14th Street, and we'll show you right here with Street Spotter 7, you've got shoes. So some of the people who left this protest have left without their shoes. Presumably those were some of the objects being strewn about and thrown by the crowd that was here. And as everyone's mentioned, this was not a protest. This was a group of people trying to get something free from a social media person that they really enjoyed, but it turned into a chaotic scene because it just seems like when one person does something, so does everyone else. It's the crowd mentality. There's a reason they call it that. But the chaos that ensued here, you're looking down at what is basically a wrecked construction site after people got on top of the subway roof here, the covering of the subway at 14th and Union Square. We saw one person try to jump off of that when police finally got to that scene. It was towards the end of what was happening here. Police were finally getting the stragglers, and there were people, even after police started to gain control, that stayed inside this construction site that they had broken into. We saw one guy jump off to try and get away from the police, landed flat on his back. It looked very painful, but he got up and then continued to run. We had people on the statue here, and now it is like a ghost town. The only things that are left here are police officers that are standing by to make sure that no one else enters. But they've got basically a perimeter set up now around the park. There is going to be a major cleanup that has to happen after all the debris that was strewn about. There is construction equipment here. There are buckets. There's paint that is all over the south side of Union Square, but mostly what is left now are the police officers and the media sort of scratching their heads, wondering how this got out of control so fast. But one of the things we noticed, because Captain Randy and MB and I were up over this from the beginning, is that it started with thousands of people and tens of police officers, and that ratio quickly got turned around when police did what police do, and they got ready for this situation. They had police aviation overhead, they had drones in the air, and they assessed what needed to be done, and they did it. And after a while, the police overtook the people that were here, and the crowds are now under control.
Okay, Shannon Stone reporting from Newscopter 7, and all of this sparked by one man, Kai Cenat, a social influencer. He was apparently live streaming from a van. He just returned from a trip from Japan and promised to give he had some giveaways to give here at Union Square, touching off just a widespread just pandemonium there. We are now going to go to Eyewitness News at 6 with Liz Cho.
And we continue to follow breaking news and a wild and dangerous situation in Union Square this afternoon. An out-of-control mob with thousands of people converging after a social media influencer promised free PlayStations for fans. At first, the crowd overwhelmed police.
A level 4 mobilization was called, and hundreds of officers eventually moved in and made arrests. Newscopter 7 was live over Union Square, where police have now, we're told, regained control of the situation. Also, the NYPD now updating us on what happened today.
Chief of Transit. Earlier today at about 1:30 p.m., the NYPD became aware of a crowd forming in Union Square. It was quickly determined that an influencer was posting on social media about showing up to Union Square and was encouraging all of his followers to come to the park. There were some posts also about giving away some gaming systems. At approximately 3 p.m., the post went viral and thousands of people began to arrive at Union Square. Soon the park and the surrounding streets were overrun with people. They were obstructing both vehicular and pedestrian traffic. The NYPD responded by calling a mobilization in response to the large crowd. As the crowd grew, so did our mobilization. The crowd was swarmed when the influencer finally arrived at the park. Individuals in the park began to commit acts of violence towards the police and the public. There was a construction site within the Union Square Park, and people broke into the park and they began to throw articles that belonged to the construction site: paint cans, bottles, rocks. We had people walking around with shovels, axes, and other tools from the construction trade. And additionally, individuals were also lighting fireworks, and they were throwing them towards the police. They were throwing them towards each other. The influencer, we were able to eventually get him out of the park and remove him for safety reasons. Our officers exercised great restraint despite the aggression that they were met with and the acts of violence they were met with. Ultimately, myself and our leadership team, working in tandem with our department attorneys, did declare this gathering an unlawful assembly. The NYPD offered multiple, and I do mean multiple, opportunities for the crowd to leave. We tried to give them a means of egress for them to exit the park and exit the streets. After numerous warnings and after being assailed, hit with rocks and bottles and other debris, we started to make arrests to clear out the park. The total number of arrests is still being tallied at this point, and we're still doing evaluations for some of our members. We did have members that sustained some injuries out here. At this time, we successfully dispersed the park, but we still have crowds mulling around Manhattan, and we have officers following them, preventing them from destroying property, looting, and other things like that. And we'll continue to be out here, and we'll continue to disperse this crowd until they're all gone. We're using our drone technology to help us monitor the situation. Of course, our aviation unit is up there as well. Our officers are still being met with some resistance after numerous warnings, and we're still making some additional arrests. This mobilization is ongoing, And as I said before, we will be here until this crowd disperses. At this point, I'll take any questions.
We're going to start off with Josh Einiger, ABC7.
Thank you, Chief.
Josh.
We've heard reports of injured officers. A woman told me she saw a cop getting jumped and beaten. We have video of you being attacked. Your shirt shows. Can you talk about injuries to members of the service and to your own experience when you came out?
Absolutely, Josh. And I believe the woman's account is possibly right, even though I don't know exactly what she's speaking about. Our officers were attacked. We were in there. We were crushed. We were pushed. I had officers on the floor. As you see, I'm a little embarrassed because I'm very dirty right here, but I was in the middle of the crowd. I was hit with multiple objects as well. I think I have a couple of injuries, but I'll figure that out once I have time to think about it.
But in terms of any officers treated for injuries that you know of?
Yeah, we had one or two officers removed, and we had officers out here. I had officers who got hit and were hurt, but they stayed. They stayed and helped us to control this.
We're going to go Associated Press.
Yeah, hi.
Hi, sir.
I'm wondering if there is any kind of action that might be taken or could be taken against the influencer.
Absolutely. We're in contact with the influencer. I have our legal team here. I'm going to have a discussion with our Commissioner Caban in a little bit, and then we'll make a decision there.
Well, I'm wondering, though, if there's anything specific that you could be targeting with?
Well, we'll discuss with our legal department about inciting a riot and other charges.
We're going to go over to Matt.
Chief, were any of the youths injured? How many of them? What was the extent of the injuries? And was he actually giving away PlayStations, or was that just a claim?
That I'm not sure in terms of the PlayStation. I personally observed young people walking out with their heads bleeding from their heads, bleeding from on their faces. I've seen I personally observed young people having panic attacks, anxiety attacks, asthma attacks. There was multiple, people were suffering out here. It was a lot of people. It was uncontrolled. It took us a while to get it under control, and a lot of young people got hurt.
Was that in confrontations with the police, or was that in the riot?
No, most of it was within the park. The young people in the park throwing objects at each other. They were dancing. They were doing a whole lot of things, but they were hurting each other as they were doing this.
Why were they stealing stuff from the construction site? What was the reason?
That I don't have an answer for.
Matt, we're going to move on. Mark Morales, CNN.
How you doing?
Mark.
What's the estimate as to how many people were here, and where is this YouTuber streaming now? What precinct is he in?
We do have him. I don't know exactly which precinct he's in. We have him. In terms of people, there was thousands of people out here. It wasn't hundreds of people. It was thousands, and mostly young people out here.
All right, Dean Moses, AM New York.
This isn't the first time something like this has happened after a giveaway. You guys can be looking to try and prevent this for the future?
We're going to definitely work on this. This is something we will have an after-action review of in terms of how we responded, how we're monitoring social media, and how we can prevent this in the future. We have encountered things like this before, but it never to this level of dangerousness where young people would not listen to our commands. They were fighting each other, they were hurting each other, and they were turning our attacks on us. We had to defend ourselves, and we had to make arrests.
Alfredo Costa, Telemundo.
Approximately, Chief, how many people were arrested today?
Quite a few. I don't have an exact answer. We loaded up a city bus. The bus, we had young people attacking the bus, trying to pull people off the bus. We had to send resources there to protect the bus. It was a very dangerous situation.
Anthony DiLorenzo, Pix 11.
Chief, the question is, how does something like this happen? Is there no monitoring at all or anything on your radar that this massive influencer is coming here? I know that you're supposed to have a permit. I've heard he doesn't have a permit, but was this at all on your radar, and how did you let him get bigger than the department?
Well, this speaks to the power of social media and the danger of social media. We do monitor social media. When I go back later on this evening, I will have an after action to determine exactly what our steps were. We can't allow this to happen again in the future.
All right, we're going to take one more question. Joe Marino, New York Post.
Chief, just to be clear, this wasn't pre-planned with the city. There was no coordination between this event producer and anyone in the department or the city. This was a totally spontaneous event that just sort of jumped off and grew and accelerated very quickly.
Yes, this was not pre-planned with the police department. This was something that was spontaneous, and as I just said in answering the last question, the power of social media, the danger of social media. Listen, we're not against young people having a good time. We're not against young people gathering, but it can't be to this level where it's dangerous. A lot of people got hurt today.
All right, thank you everyone for your time and attention. Thank you, folks.
You have been listening to a news conference with the NYPD, briefing us on the situation that has been playing out now for the better part of 2 hours, 3 hours now in Union Square. As you look at live pictures from what is now been left, an absolute mess in Union Square Park. But police now describing truly how dangerous this situation was and how aggressive this mob of people, thousands of people, as you heard the chief of department there describing that they were throwing construction materials, carrying shovels and axes, throwing paint, lighting fireworks off. They have arrested dozens of people who were then put into MTA buses, which they then had to protect because the crowd of people there were climbing on the buses and trying to get inside those buses. But again, several people arrested, several officers injured. The exact count still we're unsure of.
All right, and exactly. And that influencer who apparently started all of this, Kai Cenat, I think that is his name. We're being told by police, you heard the chief say it there, that he right now is being questioned by police. They did not say what precinct he is being questioned in. Not in custody, but he is being questioned. You also heard Madry say what we saw happen today speaks to the power and potential danger of social media. And police admit they first became aware of this situation, or at least this supposed giveaway at Union Square around 1:30 this afternoon. 2 hours later, it went viral, and that, of course, is when chaos ensued.
And it certainly sounds like, as you heard Jeff Madry say, that this was not a pre-planned police thing. They are now going to look more closely at how they can prevent something like this from happening again. Josh Einiger has been there all afternoon. He has been with the police as they moved in and got control over this. He joins us now with much more. Josh.
Well, this was just a wild scene in every way, Liz. I will tell you, just looking at Chief of Department Jeff Madry in his uniform, it's all you need to know about his hand-to-hand experience in this crowd. These were not protesters also. These were not necessarily a violent group with a political agenda. These were kids, and they went wild. Here's what the chief had to say just a few minutes ago.
I personally observed young people walking out with their heads bleeding from their heads, bleeding from on their faces. I've seen I personally observed young people having panic attacks, anxiety attacks.